Hello, Year 7, and welcome to the fourth lesson in our new inquiry for Half Term 4, the story of Genghis Khan. How did a band of nomadic herders conquer the world? You guys have worked so hard over the last couple of months, and we hope that you are as happy as we are to hear that from next week, the week beginning the 15th of March, you will be coming back into school to have all of your lessons in the classroom. That means that this is the last week of remote learning before we can continue learning about Genghis Khan in our history classrooms together in person next week, which is really exciting. In these last one or two remote lessons for history this week, please put in 100% effort to make sure that you are ready to join in next week in class and that you know what's going on. So for this inquiry, we've gone across the world all the way into the middle of Asia to a remote country sandwiched between China and Russia called Mongolia. And in the first three lessons of this inquiry, you were looking at the life of Genghis Khan between 1162 and 1227. And you were thinking about this question in part one of our inquiry. What was so remarkable about the achievements of Genghis Khan? You learnt how he came from a remote area in the northern regions of what is now Mongolia, from the Mongol tribe. He was born on the banks of the Onon River at the foot of Mount Burkan. And here, the tribe that Temujin, as he was called, grew up in were animists. They worshipped the natural features around them, including the rivers that flowed down from their holy mountain of Mount Burkan, but also the eternal blue sky above their heads. And Temujin had a very troubled childhood. His father was murdered. He spent time as a slave. His bride was kidnapped. But we learnt how gradually he came through all those challenges. And by around about 1206, he had become the principal warlord on the Mongolian plains. So this red section here demonstrates the extent of Temujin's control by 1206. And it was in this year that Temujin summoned a big meeting, a Kurultai, of all of the other tribal leaders in Mongolia and had himself crowned the head Khan of the Mongol steppes, the Mongol grasslands, and he took the name Chinggis Khan. And in English today, we would call him Genghis Khan. By the time of his death in 1227, Genghis's area of influence spread all the way across Asia, from the Pacific Ocean in the east, all the way over to the edge of Europe and the Caspian Sea here in the west. A remarkable achievement for someone born into such a remote setting. In part two, which you're going to start looking at this week, we're thinking about this question. How did the Mongol Empire continue to expand after the death of Genghis Khan? In this section, you will see how Genghis Khan's descendants continued to build the Mongol Empire, and how this empire became divided up into different sections known as khanates. And here are your tasks for the last week of remote learning. There is a part 2 booklet which you will find in the assignments section of Teams. You need to download that part 2 booklet. It has 4 pages, and those 4 pages look like this. Once you've downloaded it, read it through carefully a few times, okay? This booklet will tell you about how Genghis Khan's descendants continued to build the empire after his death. Once you've read it through a few times, you can download the L4 worksheet. There are 10 simple questions for you to answer. Once you feel like you've answered those questions, can you fill in the gaps on the Knowledge Organizer? There will be a document in the assignments called Knowledge Organizer, but when you open it, it will look like, that's the worksheet. The Knowledge Organizer looks like this. And just as before with some of our other topics, you can see that this Knowledge Organizer has gaps. Okay, try and fill them in. Okay, now you can either print it out and write it off by hand, write the gaps in by hand, or you can type it in. It's up to you. Once you've filled in the Knowledge Organizer, you can move on to number 6. There's a knowledge test, okay, which has just got 20 questions, although it's out of 25 because the last question is worth 5 points, okay. And there's 21 mark. There's 21 mark questions, and then there's one question which is worth 5 marks. And the purpose of this knowledge test is just to test your knowledge and understanding from the first 4 lessons on our new topic. Okay, to make sure that when you come in for your first lesson back with your teacher in the classroom next week, you are ready to go and that you know what's going on. This is just a way for you to train that big muscle in your head that is your brain. Now, some of you have 1 lesson this week, some of you have 2. So if you've got 2 lessons, you've got a bit more time in which to do it. If you've got 1, then you might need to spend a little bit of time outside the lesson doing it, okay? Just do as much as you can of these tasks before you come back into school. The more of them that you can do, the easier you will find everything when we do start continuing this topic in class next week. If you really want to continue learning about Genghis Khan, we would recommend this documentary. It's a BBC documentary on the rise of the Mongol Empire. It's a really cool documentary which will really help you, if you haven't watched it already, to visualize what you've been learning about, okay? So we'd recommend having a look at that as well, if you have time. So that is the final video of our remote inquiry on Genghis Khan. All right, well done for all of your work on it so far. Make sure you complete these tasks this week as best you can. But we are really looking forward in the history department to seeing you in person in the classroom next week to crack on with some really great history. Thanks, guys, and take care.